Intelligence podcast and YouTube channel. Product Intelligence is the worldwide headquarters for intelligent product creators. If you're a data scientist, a data analyst, a product manager, a UX designer, a marketer, AI is impacting the lives of everyone. And this is the place to get the best practices on creating AI products. I'm here today recording this YouTube video with Ben Taylor. Ben Taylor was the chief AI officer at Zeph.ai. Zeph was recently acquired by DataRobot. Congrats, Ben. That announcement just came out just a few days ago. Is that right, Ben?
Yeah.
And perhaps he'll share a little bit. We'll get started by having Ben introduce himself a little bit more, talking about his journey with Zeph and his career in AI. And then we're going to get started. The topic that we're going to discuss today is product intelligence and how AI is disrupting and changing the role of product managers. So Ben, I'm going to hand it over to you and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on. I love product. Product is, I think it's one of my favorite topics, and this will come up in some of the answers. So my background, I'm all over the map. My career looks like this, but that meandering has actually been very helpful for me when it comes to approaching new problems. So I studied chemical engineering. I had an emphasis in biomedical, kind of biopharmaceuticals. So I did a research project with Genentech when I finished school. I got into programming because I had an e-commerce company I was running while going to school. I got into computer vision. I got my master's in chemical engineering, and I went and worked for Intel and Micron. And I did that for 5 years. And then I joined the dark side and went and worked for a hedge fund as a quant and a GPU AI consultant. And then when it comes to data science, I think I kind of rounded out and matured with a data science role, running the data science team for a company called HireView. So they're a Sequoia Capital company, and we were able to create a new AI product and release that to the market. And then 3 years ago, I got the itch to go full time on my own startup. So I co-founded that with David Gonzalez, and we focused on AutoML with deep learning. And now the next stage in my journey will be with DataRobot for the foreseeable future.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Ben. Thank you for that introduction. So the first discussion question here is, what is the role of a product manager in building great AI products? Just for a little bit of background, Ben has had a variety of different roles. My name is Jaekob Chenina. I've worked as a data scientist at a startup, also transitioned into doing my own AI startup like Ben. We both have that heart of an entrepreneur in us. And just now I'm working in product management, worked at Adobe and at Oracle, leading teams of data scientists to build those cutting edge AI features. So now our first question here that we want to discuss is, what is the role of a product manager in building great AI technology?
I love that question. So I think their role is to herd the cats to success, because with data science, you can get a lot of excitement, the shiny new toy with AI, and it is incredibly easy to work on things that don't matter. They distract and they waste time, or they could negatively impact the product. They could actually cause confusion. And so it's important for the product manager to hold everyone accountable for value, but not give into the hype, not give into the excitement, and focus on something that is delivered. I think a lot of data scientists really struggle with getting models into production, models that are dependent, that people depend on, that consumers use. That's a whole different ball game that a lot of people don't have the experience with. And so I see the product manager as being they really are the gatekeeper. No AI model should go into a product if it hasn't had careful review by a product manager to decide what the value is, what's the experience. A lot of AI can be hidden too. A lot of AI that goes into products, the customer doesn't even know it's there, but the product manager does, because hopefully they've had a discussion about it.
Yeah, absolutely. I just building upon what you said in terms of herding the cats, I think that what the product manager is really responsible for is just validating what the end goal, what the end experience should be. There's certain products that are very there's a low level of uncertainty. For example, if you go to the grocery store and get pasta, people know what types of pastas people typically like. There's curly pasta, long pasta. People know what the price should be, and that it hasn't changed a whole lot for many years. But when it comes to AI, this is something that's changing so rapidly that there's a lot more ambiguity in terms of what that end outcome should look like. And if an AI feature gets released into production and it really doesn't meet the customer's needs, but the algorithm is working, it's the product manager that's on the hook. Because if the data scientist, their expertise, their discipline is to create those models and to optimize them and to have that analytical perspective. But in terms of the end experience, that is the role of the product manager. And a mistake I see lots of companies make is they hire lots of data scientists and they say, hey, you data scientists, you go make AI happen. And they don't have lots of guidance or lots of support from the side of the product management to really validate those user experiences where there's a ton of ambiguity, where those data scientists may not even be talking to those customers in order to validate those end outcomes in the first place. So our next question. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So the one more thing to throw in there based on what you said, the validation is huge because I feel like a product manager has to come back and ask, did the model work? So for me to train a model and say, hey, good news, it's working, the product manager should bring a level of accountability where they will come back weeks later, months later, and say, good news, bad news, this model is not generalizing in the real world. It's not generalizing on our customer base. Where I feel like sometimes data scientists they just want to be done. The product manager is never done.
Exactly. And those data scientists, they could be optimizing a model that doesn't even necessarily meet the goals of the end user experience. So that product manager, in my opinion, needs to have some level of familiarity with data science and AI so that they can make sure that what the data scientist is spending 3 months working on is actually going to hit the mark in terms of what the end goal is. So I guess that leads to our next question here is what should the relationship look like between a data scientist and a product manager?
So I think the roles there's more responsibility, I think, on the product manager because a lot of data scientists will struggle with communication. And so rather than telling the data science community that you need to level up to the point that you can talk to a product manager who's less familiar with AI, I wouldn't put that pressure on them. I'd put it on the product manager. I'd say they need to understand AI at a high level so they can interact with a data scientist, but also understand that a lot of times the data scientists struggle with being value driven. And they're happy to work on a lot of different things, especially if they're interesting. But the product manager, so I do see them working together, potentially in the same room, same office, having meetings. But the product manager is the one I think that has to level up on the communication here, not the other way around.
Fantastic. I couldn't agree more with you. And in terms of product managers are the people leaders. They're the communicators. And I absolutely agree that they shouldn't put that burden on those data scientists to say, hey, you need to be the ones that are communicating and learning all these skills that's not necessarily in their professional toolbox of expertise.
Yeah, and you just remind me of something. There's going to be a temptation for the data scientist to begin teaching the product manager facts about data science. So if you're a product manager and I know you're familiar with AI, but if you were less familiar with AI, and if I was a junior data scientist or maybe kind of a hardcore research data scientist, I would want you to know that this model is getting this AUC score, or this model has this level of accuracy or this statistic. And if you don't know what that is, I will try to explain it to you like you're an idiot or something. Why are we having this conversation? The conversation should be about the value. What is the metric? What's the KPI? And it has nothing to do with AUC. It's going to be click-through rate. It's going to be a metric that the product managers have discussed already for years. And so for me as a data scientist to try to educate you or kind of let you know why this AUC is valuable, or why this score or statistic is useful, or why this clustering method should be considered, that can be intimidating. And I think a lot of people, not just product managers, engineers, can feel intimidated, where maybe that means I'm smarter than you. Maybe that means you should listen to me. And the answer is no. You should hold true to the KPIs that you're already familiar with, and don't fall into the temptation with where the data science might try to teach you something, because it's all a big distraction, and it's going the other way from value. And yeah, so the value is hard. The product manager has to figure out how to connect the dots to value. Just know that it will be a little bit of a struggle working with the data scientist. And it's not because they're incompetent, it's because they have a different language. You have two different languages, and you're trying to connect the dots.
Absolutely. And I personally have seen lots of AI initiatives fail because the AI is seen as such a nebulous and complicated and sophisticated thing. And when it's surrounded and wrapped in so many equations, just as you said, Ben, lots of product people or even business executives will kind of check out, and they'll say, you know what you're doing, you know this better than I do. And then and then all of a sudden they're not getting feedback from the product management, they're not getting feedback from the executives, and then they're kind of spinning their wheels on their own. And even though they've got all those fancy equations, it just really doesn't necessarily meet the mark in terms of what customers and the business is really looking for.
Yeah, and I want to be really open too with my own personal failings. Where I remember HireVue when I first joined. I think the first month I sent an email to the CTO and the CEO where I was very excited about this analysis because I felt like it was an obvious breakthrough for them. And the CEO responded and said, "What the hell am I looking at?" Where initially there was kind of this misunderstanding where I didn't understand all the roles and responsibilities that a CEO has, and I had this temptation to teach. Well, let me teach you about this bootstrap analysis, or let me teach you about what this is. And then I remember another awkward meeting where I felt like I was having a very normal, fluid conversation for me. And the CEO interrupted me and said, "Ben, we know you're smart. That's why we hired you. You don't have to keep reminding us." And he's not trying to be a dick. He's just kind of like saying, "Look, communication is failing. It's not my problem. It's your problem. I'm going to let you know right now, Ben. Communication is failing." And so that was helpful for me. That was these helpful, awkward learning experiences where I kind of did a full 180 and realized I'm not teaching anyone anything. They don't need to know anything. Like they don't need to know the details. And that's difficult because sometimes we're technophiles. We're so excited about our domain, we want to teach, and that's not what's helpful.
I've had a very similar experience to you when I was working as a data scientist. And I had a marketer that was my stakeholder. And I was so excited about this also an analysis that I did that I thought was very interesting. And the marketer cut me off and he said, Jacob, I don't need to know all this technical stuff. My job as a marketer, for you, your job is for me is to hide away all of that technical mumbo jumbo and make it as simple as possible for me to understand what's going on with our customers. I don't need to learn your technical tools. And then
Yeah.
I will do what I do best as a marketer, which is to create awesome marketing content and be creative. And that's what I do best. So your job is to hide away as much technical distractions as possible. And that for me was also similar to you, kind of a sobering realization that, oh, I guess not everyone needs to know this stuff.
Yeah. No, and it's great. I I wish we could learn those lessons sooner, but hopefully people listening can learn those and kind of hesitate before they show people their analysis.
And you brought up a really interesting point about communication. And I think that data science often gets lumped into one big thing. But I think within what people call data science, there are two very distinct functions within data science. And one is data science for the purpose of analytical strategy, very much focused on analytics, using tools like Tableau and very analysis focused. And in both your story and my story, it sounds to me like you and I were both kind of within that vein of, hey, we're providing a business insight, something analysis driven. And then there's this other camp of data science, kind of what Data Robot is doing, which is, hey, this is about machine learning models. This is not necessarily a business insight. This is something that's going to be productionalized. It's going to be a recommendation, a Netflix recommendation system, a matrix factorization algorithm, whatever that is. It's not driving a business insight. It's driving a customer experience. And I think that if you're in that camp of data scientists as, hey, that analytical data science, that communication skill is a lot more key. And if you're more of that machine learning engineer, then the communication, I mean, still is kind of a general life skill that everyone should have, but it's less essential for the machine learning engineer and even more essential for those data scientists that are functioning in that analytical, strategic function of data science.
Yeah, yeah, I definitely agree. There's room for both types, and they're both useful. They're both valuable. It's not like one is better than the other. Maybe one is better than the other. Like communication is good, but there's still lots of value for having deep tech.
Which type of data scientist did you spend most of your career being?
I think I transitioned from deep tech to more on the communication, but I think for me and for my personal brand, I need both. And so my goal when I communicate people is I need to inspire them by showing them innovative AI breakthroughs that did not exist a week ago or a month ago. And so I kind of have to maintain deep tech, but I've made enough mistakes communicating. I think I've been able to kind of break through to that on the other side of that.
Awesome. Great. So how do you think that product management as a discipline is changing?
Um, I think with AI, it can feel intimidating, like it's changing a lot. I would try to knock that down and say it's not changing, and you just have a new tool. And just like you don't need to understand the details of Angular or React or serverless or these new things that are coming out, they're new tools. So hopefully, the thing that is amusing or laughable is if you talk to product managers, when these new technologies came online, like serverless or React, how much did it disrupt their job and their flow? And hopefully the answer is not a lot. Like they just kind of understood, okay, I've got a new tool in the toolkit. What can it do? Maybe AI, it'll be a little bit more for them to ramp, but when I say ramp, it's at a very high level, like listening to YouTube tutorials. And a lot of times you talk about like flying or elevation, where data scientists are boots on the ground. They're actually cutting code, doing stuff. Developers are above that. We're talking 30,000-foot view, like just a high level. Like what are the opportunities? What can be automated? That so hopefully it doesn't feel too intimidating or overwhelming. I wouldn't suggest anyone listening needs to go to school and become a data scientist and now function as a data scientist and a product manager. That would be way overkill, totally unnecessary.
Yeah, I definitely agree that you don't have to be a product manager as a generalist. One of my friends that works at Google explained to me that on Google campus they have trainings for UX designers, and they have training in software engineering best practices for the software engineers, and they have data science training there provided for the data scientists. But at Google, there's no product management training that's provided there, because the assumption is if you're a good product manager, you are a generalist. You wear multiple hats, and a good product manager will go and do those trainings in software engineering, in data science, and UX design, and they will become conversant so that they can collaborate and kind of bridge the gap between those disciplines. So my perspective, I think it's great that we've got some different opinions here, but I actually would be a little bit more strongly advocating for for product managers to get some familiarity with data science. Now, that doesn't mean that you need to go, I think there's an extreme, like you don't need to go get a PhD, but I in software and tech in general, for example, for product managers, lots of companies like to hire product managers that are former software developers. Like probably the most common career path for a product manager is someone who has a CS degree. They go and work as a software engineer for a couple years, and then they go and get an MBA, and then they kind of have that expertise in both tech and business that's really well suited for product management. Now, do you have to work as there's certainly lots of product managers, very successful ones that haven't worked as a software engineer or even have a technical degree. But within product management, there's those product managers that are really focused on UI related things, and also some product managers that are like a platform product manager. They're really working, designing APIs and on those very platformy, back-endy type of product managers. I've seen a lot of them, like nearly all of them that I can think of, have some like pretty very technical background. And so I've also seen other product managers that have no familiarity with AI say, hey, we're going to make an AI that just recognizes when you're having a bad experience on the website, and then boom, a chatbot appears and says, hey, you're having a bad experience and I'm here to rescue you. And if you don't understand AI, that might seem possible. But if you do have at least a functional understanding of AI, a product manager might be like, hey, that's really not realistic. And knowing what AI can and can't do, I think this type of a user experience and this type of an end goal is going to be a lot more productive and viable and just give a much better customer experience in the end. Because let's be honest, I think many of us have interacted with some sort of chatbot or anything that really just fails to perceive my intent as a user. And a lot of that might be driven by a product person that was trying to push something that was really just unrealistic to accomplish in the first place.
Yeah. So listening to you talk, I guess the thought in my mind is you should have a goal to become AI competent to the level of a CTO. So a CTO can be very specific. They can whiteboard with a data science team, but they will not cut code and they will not build the solution, but they can have a detailed conversation. So would you say a CEO or CTO is naive with AI? No, I wouldn't say they're naive. They're having a conversation with me. We're talking about, possibilities, things that could exist. And they can even use some of the jargon to be specific, but they don't need to write the algorithms. So a CTO would be a fantastic goal to say a competent AI aware CTO. If I could get to that level of understanding, I can be a very sharp tool for my company.
Yeah, that's great. I think that's a great goal, and I think that we've all I've seen CTOs work function that way. You can whiteboard, you can discuss things, you can have an opinion. If you don't have if you're walking into a room with the data scientist and the data scientist is showing you algorithms and you have no opinion, then that is an indication that you need to deepen your expertise, or at least your understanding of AI, enough that you have an opinion and you can argue and push back with what your data scientist is proposing.
Yeah.
So our last question here is, what resources for a product manager who has that goal of getting to that point where they have an opinion, being a CTO level of understanding with artificial intelligence, machine learning, what resources would we recommend?
I think YouTube is a great resource. Some of the resources that came up before we started were, you have Kaggle, you've got Stack Overflow, you've got these other code options. I would not recommend those because they're very technical. They're not as helpful. YouTube is great. Listening to podcasts like this, I've got one I'm working on. The other thing too, I would imagine if people have questions, they could probably reach out to either one of us directly and say, I am confused about this topic. I'm confused about reinforced learning. I'm confused about NLP. Could you have a conversation on your podcast at a high level, or just throw something up on LinkedIn where we're not cutting code, we're not sharing our screen, we are having a conversation at the 30,000 foot view on, this is the history of NLP, this is the way people approach things, and we're not geeking out about the things that you and I talked about before, where we both got into kind of trouble on the details of the recipe. We're kind of talking about the high level approach. So I love video options on YouTube because they're short. If you don't like the speaker, find a different one. It's easy for you to quickly go through a topic.
Yeah, absolutely second that. Feel free to reach out to me. Feel free to reach to Ben. Subscribe to our YouTube channels, and we will be happy to discuss any questions you have on this topic. Also, in terms of other resources that I would recommend, I really just suggest to experiential learning. I personally, I've learned a lot by watching videos, but I really internalize things a lot more. That doesn't mean you need to code an algorithm. Even if with Tableau and Excel, there are logistic regression models that come out of the box. So you can kind of simulate an AI use case. If you're an e-commerce, let's say you're using, for example, Shopify. Shopify has the ability to download transactions as a CSV file. So you just download all those transactions, you have it in Excel, and you can probably find a YouTube video about how to create a logistic regression model using Excel. You don't have to write a single line of code, but there you can, within a couple of hours, you can create a very simple algorithm that will predict customer value, a customer lifetime value prediction model using some aggregations and yeah, just very little coding. So just having those experiences, it becomes less abstract, and then you can really experience what that actually means to have those models. And then as you do those things, even with no coding, you will begin to form more opinions about what you can and can't do. And you'll learn as you gain this experience that a lot of it depends on the data. And you've probably heard your data scientists say before, oh, we don't have data for this, or oh, the data is too messy. And you've probably, like, even I myself have rolled my eyes like, come on, we can probably still make it work. But as you get into that level of detail, you'll realize that the data really matters. And then you can support your data science team a lot more and say, hey, we need to improve the web analytics tracking. We need this data to improve our algorithms. And then you're going to be there positioned to lead the development team to get ahead of, like, even before your data scientist says, I need XYZ, you can say, hey, data scientist, I think you're going to need these data points, and I'm already going to collaborate with the executives and the CTO and the dev managers so that we can get this prioritized, and you can have the data that you're going to need for this model before you start building your model and realize that you need it 3 months or 6 months from now. Well, thank you so much, Ben, for joining me for this podcast, for this YouTube video. It's been a pleasure talking to you, having you on the show. Super excited about your journey with Data Robot, and subscribe to our channels just for more of the latest and greatest, and build the cutting edge. Just as Ben said, what possibilities is AI unlocking that didn't exist a week ago, a month ago? It's constantly changing. There's so much untapped potential out there that has not been reached. Subscribe to our channels and get tuned in to this discussion of where AI is going. Any closing
Thanks,
remarks?
Jacob. Closing remarks. I've got a bunch, but maybe that's a follow-up podcast. So the one thing that we didn't hit on is, a lot of times we talk about AI going into the product where it's customer facing, but AI is a fantastic tool for the product manager in their own product validation process. So whether you're doing mouse tracking or some type of user behavior, you can really help your own experimentation. Because I feel like after going through a startup, I really hate opinions. I love opinions with external validation. So as you think about your own product management flow and process, how many decisions are coming from the opinion space versus customer validation, customer behavior? And AI is a tool there. And this actually goes back to something you said, that if you do level up on AI, that's an opportunity for you to really become a rock star in your own domain by leveling up that much more. Because if you really are competent with AI, you can begin to suggest experiments and ideas that your data science team would never suggest, because they don't know, they don't understand, or maybe they don't even respect your process on how you validate a product. It feels very touchy-feely, feels subjective. And so there's an opportunity there for someone to really rise up and be a badass in the product space.